welcome to the Face Downs, your source for TCG news and all things Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm your host, Lucas.
I'm Ruben.
And I'm Joe.
Hello. We're back again for another podcast, another catch up. How are you doing? How's everyone doing?
I'm good.
Yeah, not too bad. Just came off.
How's your week been, Joe?
Yeah. Remember those Lucas hobby leagues?
It was a long week.
Yeah,
I sat there working and thinking about what I was going to do when I got hold of my the boat. And then obviously with shipping delays, we missed out on the sneak peek this weekend. But we made the most of it, and we just ran a normal hobby league this week with a couple of mats to give away. So yeah, it was good.
Sick.
Yeah, a couple of new.
You
players
mentioned
as well.
Bode, and me and Ruben have been very much enjoying, finally getting our hands on Burst of Destiny. Have you had any chance to see some Burst of Destiny cards, Joe?
I have looked into Flunder and Despia, and I've been disappointed by B Trooper, and that's about it.
Yeah, well.
And
yeah,
DPE,
poor
obviously.
bugs.
Yeah, obviously Sword Soul, the only meta deck absent there. Is there any reason?
I just haven't looked into it. I heard it was linear, and linear decks bore me. And that's
But you
about
like
it.
Satellite. Where's the truth, Joe?
I liked Trevor Bouncing, but I didn't like. I don't mind Stellar Knights. I just at the time I had all four of the Duelist Alliance decks, and occasionally I'd pick up the old Stellar Knights and give them a go when I felt like turning off the brain for a tournament.
Yeah, in fairness, Satellite Knights is like a back row deck with a Xyz toolbox.
Yeah.
Like Deneb Pass was not the actual. That wasn't the deck.
No,
the deck was back row featuring Xyz. Deneb was just the best normal summon in that deck.
+1.
Sword Soul very much more of a I'ma just do this every game with no variance.
Yeah, and I like Token Collector a lot.
Well, the Sword Soul doesn't.
Yeah, Sword Soul does not. But yeah, I think Burst of Destiny has some interesting strategies. Obviously, this is our last core set for the year. So this will definitely have an impact on any and all events going forward in which they are legal, which ties in very nicely to this week's theme, which is the discussion of events.
Yeah, events. I was going to say, our only exposure to Hobby League is when me and you are the top two at a tournament and we get to play in person because we're in the same room. Because, of course, we're in lockdown. Still. And have really been in lockdown events-wise for 2 years now. So this is an interesting discussion because we're going to talk about what events we've been to and looking at it's a short list for 2 years and, by no fault of our own, But before we get into our own events, I think we wanted to talk about the different kinds of events that exist in Yu-Gi-Oh!
Caliber,
Yeah, because I feel like they all hit different thresholds. They all appeal to different kinds of players. And I think if anyone out there listening is like, oh, I really, what else is there in Yu-Gi-Oh! Apart from me just playing at my kitchen table with my friends? This is, I think, going to be a really good little list for you. And for those people who go, oh, I like hobby leagues, but I want something a bit more. We're here to tell you the differences and let you know how events are, what their structures are, and some of our personal history with some of these events going through. So I guess should we start at the very beginning, where we go very first when you go, I love this game. How do I play with other people? And what event would I attend if that was where I would want to go? Lucas.
Sorry.
Ruben passing the baton very cleanly there. Well, it's definitely locals. It's definitely hobby. And I distinctly remember when we started playing, we were going to Vagabond CBD. And there was 4 people there every week.
Yeah.
And I think we went there 3 or 4 times before they were like, there's 20 people going at Card Merchant every week. We're like, 20 people? Because me and Ruben were very much keen. We were competitively keen out the gate. We were like, we want competition. We want opposition, I guess, to make us better. And our first kind of real hobby league was when we went to that, Card Merchant where I work now, hilariously. And did play the classic 3 or 4 round hobby league, just casual, playing for 2 or 3 packs. There's no major prizing. Everyone's just bringing the deck that they find the most fun this week most of the time. Definitely still some people just bringing meta and labbing that out, but it almost feels like hobby leagues. You're less concerned about losing, so it caters to the meta people can be up top table and the people just having fun can chill. And play each other. Joe, you've been running a lot of hobby leagues lately.
Yeah, And to me, Hobby League is the foundation of Yu-Gi-Oh. Like without a Hobby League, there wouldn't be other events because it's the core. Like you go every week to your local Hobby League to play the game. And without
I'm trying to.
Yeah, well, you try to. Yeah. I mean,
It's where you
obviously,
find your community.
Yeah, I'm in a different situation to the other guys. Like I've been out of lockdown for a little bit now, and I run the Hobby League in Palmerston North. And what we've seen is like I took it over about 3 or 4 months ago, and it's grown to about an average of 14 players, which is huge for Palmy.
Nice.
But what we're seeing is like these guys are starting to form a community, and what we've spoken before about Ruggles getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh, and you saw it in that series where it becomes like a group of friends almost that you catch up with each week and develop with, and they're the core players that you end up traveling to these bigger events with. So like I think Hobby League is like essential, and like having a good Hobby League is the base of all Yu-Gi-Oh.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I think it almost promotes like you just being social with your friends, going out like, every week you're catching up with people that you enjoy being around, and they test you as well. They give you really good, a good premise to learn how to play. And like Lucas said, there's many different like skill levels, so you can go from very casual, the children that can be there, to some people who have been to some very large events and have attended something that's a bit more competitive, which I think is our next one on the list, Joe, and that would be regionals. So you have a very expansive regional history, is that correct?
Yeah, so I honestly couldn't tell you how many regionals I've been to because it's just that many.
I love that.
I started playing competitively back in 2006. So my first experience there was a Pharaohs tour, which was like a qualifier thing. So not so much a regional, but then I moved on to doing the regionals. And the cool thing about regionals is like it's not. So if you play in your own regional as such, like it's your local group of players, but you all of a sudden have got like 20 or 30 out of town visitors from the like other areas about an hour or two away from you, and it's just the next step up. Like they're all bringing meta decks, and
what would you say? What's the difference between a regional? I guess
it's a lot
and like
more
a hobby.
Like it's a lot more structured. It's official.
Like you get like invites, right? Isn't that the difference?
Yeah. You're trying to qualify for nationals, and I think it was OC now. But like initially, what you'd have to do is if you topped, you got a qualification for nationals, and that was changed, I think, about 5 years ago, and it changed to a qualification for Oceania. So there's a lot on the line, and people don't hold back. They come with like the best decks. They prepare, they test, they buy the most expensive cards. It's a massive step up from your local Hobby League, because obviously at Hobby League, like you guys said, you'll bring in your favorite deck, you bring in like a rogue deck to have a bit of fun with. You're still kind of building up your like meta deck as such. Like I have a lot of local players at the moment where they're starting to tap into the meta and they're slowly building it up. When you go to a regional, the top probably like 20 or 30 players at the regional will be playing a full meta deck with all the cards, and that's the difference. There's so much more on the line.
There's no price barrier. Like you're just going to spend the money you need to spend.
Yeah, like people just don't.
And like you said, there's stakes to a regional. I think that's like the key difference between a regional and say a hobby league. People are playing for an invite or for, often there's quite decent prizing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at things like amazing, like branded deck boxes, really like great branded mats, which, as a little tangent, are a lot more accessible in New Zealand than say some of these, if you're listening overseas, these larger events. Because generally it's given out mats to the top 8, and in New Zealand we're not really capping at like a large amount. Like I think Joe will probably have a larger amount of like players, but really I've only ever seen like maybe just over 30 people, whereas in America it's like 80 player regionals, 100 player regionals. So like the mats are something you really do play for.
I remember, like, I would say as a baseline, regionals in New Zealand would average about 30 to 35 players. Like you used to get ones where like the bigger ones would be 50, but then like sometimes you'll go to a regional and only have like 20 players. So like it is good. And what was really cool about the regional season that I always used to enjoy was the road trips. So like Us and all
Me
the
too.
local players, we would like jump in a car, we'd drive to like Hawke's Bay, we'd drive to Wellington, we'd drive over to the Bay, and we'd just like go to these regionals, and then like the following week, so you'd go to their regional, and then the following week they would all jump in cars and come to your regional, and it was quite cool because like it used to be like,
Oh, it's the best.
let's steal the invite off of Taranaki, or let's steal the invite off of Hawke's Bay, and then they would be like, let's steal the invite from Palmy, you know, like it used to be a bit of like almost like a regional like war in a way.
Like
So like
pirates.
yeah,
going around the country.
it was quite cool though. Like and also it expanded the community out. So like you met like people in a localized, like a semi-localized area where it was like 2 or 3 hours away from you, like that sort of player base. And then when you went up to the next events, like you recognize these other players.
I'd love to hear some more of those. When we talk about events that we've done, I definitely want to hear some of those road trip stories. The ones you can tell on the podcast.
Oh yeah.
Save some of them for the group chat.
Yeah, some of them can stay archived at this moment in time. But it's really interesting, like listening to you speaking about, you know, these larger scale events. You have, I think, the other one that Lucas and I have personally experienced was something like Geek Culture Championships. And I know that you said previously you've had Game Player Championships. That was before Lucas and I's time. Would you say that those are very comparable events to another, like, quote-unquote, regional level events?
So Game Player Championships was actually closer to a national event.
Well, we'll be talking about that very soon.
Yeah. So Game Player, we used to get an average of about 120 to 150 players. And, like, that was... it used to be the 2 major championships a year in New Zealand, and we used to travel up to that one. That was a one-off championship though, so like that is the difference between a regional. There was a lot at stake. I think the prizes used to be like a case and flights or something to. Oh no, that was nationals, but you used to get like a case or just a high like prize because it wasn't so much like a regional event that was like sponsored by Konami or something.
That's why I put them in the regional, because they are bigger events. Like I put down like we'll talk about it later, but like Shuffle and Cut did a win an envelope, which is about $1,000. The World Championship prize envelope sealed, and then the GC champs was, I think, flights replacing the gameplay champs that year. But they're both large events, and I mean regionals could get up to 60 players on a good day. But they're both large events with like more stakes. That's kind of what I was getting at. Was nationals has a different air to it. I think
it's a huge
nationals
vibe.
Was the, because we're going to talk about nationals next, was I think a little bit more like the world's try hard, like the real let's do this kind of player. You know, like Shuffle and still it's still attracted a kind of more casual player that could show up, but nationals, you know, I mean, you can talk about it more, Joe, because you've been to more nationals. Was a little bit more of a professional event, would you say?
What I would say is the stakes are different, and there's also like a prestigious sort of thing with a national. So like no one like, and this is no offense to any player that's one of those big sort of tournaments before. No one remembers who won the Shuffle or this event or that, or you know, no one really remembers that. They will, but like you know, when it comes to national, you're a national champion. People remember that. Like people
There's
can
pride in
almost they can almost recite the national champions like throughout time in Yu-Gi-Oh. You know, like in New Zealand anyway. Like everyone remembers like your Chris Dalton who went back to back, and like the original one. I can't remember her name, but she won with Byrne in the first year of our New Zealand nationals.
Nice.
What an icon.
Yeah, and like people just like they remember who won. I was Kevin Lau was the other guy who won back to back with X Sabers, and like he like you just remember the names like, and they are like you're a national champion and you will go to like a massive event. And I think back initially when you won nationals, OC wasn't an event. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like I don't believe
we wouldn't know run time.
Yeah, I don't believe. I think it went nationals straight to Worlds. Or like I think OC came in a bit later, but yeah, like there was huge stakes for it. Like if you won nationals in New Zealand, you got to have flights, massive prizes, and a free invite to OC. So like everything was paid for. You used to just get to go for a free trip to Australia, and that's big. Plus you would get like a massive amount of. I think one year was like can't remember what the console was at the time, but it was like the console, flights, and accommodation to OC. So like it's a big prize.
That's amazing. Yeah. And that's what people play for. And I think that, you know, nationals, the obviously you say that garners, that's kind of what you're playing for. Your regional levels is your invites. And so is it true to assume that from nationals we progress on to the YCS events? So that's your next big step. And I think that for those people, YCS stands for Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Series. So these are kind of what we would deem as like, I'm going to say like continental events, like because obviously
worldwide.
Yeah, they're worldwide, but they're kind of very continental. Like we would have, I can see we have like YCS Sydney, but that is encompassing of New Zealand. You have obviously like YCS Long Beach, but that's anyone from America can attend those kind of events. So yeah, you have you attended a YCS? Is that I think is that the so this is I think where we cap off. We do know many YCS attendees. I think there's a lot of in the community. People like Ross Hitchens. We have literally had a top 32 YCS player, Dino Sposovsky, on the podcast, talking about his experience with the events. Like I said, Ross Hitchens, Andrew Finaki, they have all been, I believe they're some of the last people to ever attend in-person YCSs until they resume. But what do you, because I know that that's something that you've worked to for quite a while, Joe. What is your impression of a YCS?
So a YCS is just like the next step up. Like it's huge. Like you don't often see a YCS with anywhere less than 800 players. It's a massive event. Like you're playing for like 2 days. Because it's that big. And it is prestigious. Like people know the YCS winners. Like if you win a YCS, you've made it in Yu-Gi-Oh. That's a big deal. Like people talk about YCS winners even now. Like you talk about even Pack in his videos will be like, oh, so and so, this YCS winner. It's huge. Like
Pack a YCS winner himself.
Pack is now a YCS winner. Yeah. So like I've always wanted to go to them. It was just a timing thing for me. Like I always intended to go to YCS Sydney, but I stopped playing just before, and then I lost a bit of interest and didn't go. I regret it now because obviously with COVID and stuff, like
it's the last one.
It's the last one for a long time. But we didn't know. And I think that's like almost the aim for most competitive Yu-Gi-Oh players is to go to YCSs, because it's the pinnacle.
People will travel countries for YCSs. I think that's like a big difference. If people hear like, oh, there's a YCS in Utrecht in is it Iceland?
Netherlands or Holland?
One of the two.
Yeah, something European.
There's a chance that someone from America might fly over just because they're like, I want to play a YCS.
And guess what? They are. Like we are seeing these incredible events in 2022, both YCS Pasadena, which is America, California, and Utrecht, which I believe is either Holland or Netherlands.
I think that's Iceland.
Utrecht?
Yeah, that's Iceland.
I don't think that's Iceland, but it's anyway Northern Europe.
It's Netherlands. There you go. Just Google.
Someone send me an email and let us know.
Please let us know. Netherlands?
Yeah, Netherlands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Netherlands. So we see a lot of online presence. Like we see the people that we follow on Twitter, the people we follow on YouTube. They're booking flights. They're booking round trips to go Pasadena, Utrecht, because I believe they're like within a fortnight of each other. So if you're dedicated to that YCS grind, that is absolutely something that people do consistently.
That's what they represent.
Yeah.
YCSs definitely represent, you're not quite a world champion, but winning YCS Pasadena almost solidifies you as, if not the best player in the TCG. You are in the top 5, right? Because maybe a couple weren't present, but most good players go to major YCSs and they will travel the country almost like pros will in other card games that have prizing and support for professional players. But
I think the thing is if you win a YCS, you make a name for yourself in the game. Like people, like they'll talk about people that build decks, and they'll be like, "Oh, this guy who won this YCS," and your name will be mentioned all the time in the whole Yu-Gi-Oh realm as such.
Your deck will definitely go down as like the correct build of a deck.
Yeah, and not to mention as well, a YCS also brings really good coverage. Usually, like you got Yu-Gi-Oh TCG Europe on Twitch that like run these events, and they have really professional looking like setups. So like,
I mean, we have there's content creators like Tatsum, Delta, and Lithium. Like they're employed by Konami to give you some really comprehensive overview of these events, and that's so much insight, and that's just a little bit of extra work for them, but it gives you so much for those who can't attend.
Yeah, and I've always sat and watched a lot of YCSs before because they are very, very watchable. Like they have good commentary from like professional players. I think we've seen Billy Brake on the commentary team a few times, who's like a really like insightful sort of person. I can't remember the Italian guy, but he's the one who won Euros a few years back. He commentates on the European ones. And like, so you got these like players who have like won really good events and they commentate it. So you're like listening to people that like know the cards, and like it's very easy to watch. And not to mention the graphics on screen and stuff are like really good. Like you get to see card names in hand, you get to see like the field really clearly. Like you get to really like get involved in the event, even sitting at home.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the most impressive thing. We do have like a couple other things as well. Obviously, we touched on, PAC being a remote dual YCS winner. Those have been replacing, these larger scale events during these really trying times. And even before that, we have things like Pro Play Games and the Luxury Championship Series, which were the only kind of larger scale events that were attended by people, like we'd say, probably internationally. To give us a really good insight. That was really popular during like the mid 2020s, when basically the entire world was just put on pause. And this was the most effective way for people to keep up with meta decks, things that are relevant, things that are topping. I believe I personally remember watching the LCS results come out, and I believe it was Jesse Cotton, or one of the person who won with Virtual World was on Chao Feng, and I kid you not, the next day they were $20 super rares. And like that's just stuff you learn from that, like the interaction with Chao Feng and Chuche.
You only learn that from the top
learn that from the top players. Those are the people who play it. Those are the people who learn it out. And I think that that's what these events give to a lot of people.
These events were relevant because they were on Dueling Book before we had remote duels, if you remember.
They weren't as supported.
No, we didn't have remote duels as a fixated concept. Like we hadn't. It was early lockdown. So of course we couldn't play any official Konami events at all because Konami won't recognize Dueling Book as an official platform.
Yeah.
So that was also a relevant part of these events, right, Ruben? Like the fact they could be run on unofficial software, I think is what drove people initially to these. Now they've dropped off because we have remote duels and like official Konami supported events.
Yeah, it was
absolutely
definitely a weird time for Yu-Gi-Oh! And it still is at the moment. Like lockdown, obviously, it was a double-edged sword, I feel like, with Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, because with lockdown, it drew a lot of nostalgic players back to the game, because I was sitting at home just going, what do I do with myself? Like, what do I spend my money on right now? I can't go anywhere. So they're like, oh, let's collect Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. And I have probably about half my locals, so like people that like have just come back to the game during lockdown. Like, because they were like, oh, what should I do with myself? Oh, let's play games, let's play cards. Like, and then the other side of it is it really did hurt the upper end of tournaments, I feel. Like, I don't know about you guys, but my experience with remote duels is pretty limited. I played one, and it was okay. I can't say it was like badly run or anything. It was perfectly ran, but like, I just didn't feel it. I love the in-person events, and because I've been playing for so long, and doing these in-person events forever, like I miss that. And that is what I play Yu-Gi-Oh! For, is I love the traveling, I love the in-person stuff. And when it comes to remote duels, it just hurts. Like, it's like, oh, this is not the same. Like, it's cool because you get to talk to the other person at the end of the game and experience that still. But at the end of the day, you're sitting there in your room, kind of isolated, just playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think that's what the biggest struggle with lockdown was.
Agreed. I as personally, I could not do simulators. It was so hard for me to connect, because I think it got to a point like you just kind of like have an out of body experience going, I'm sitting in a room on my computer clicking images for 3 hours. Just clicking buttons. And you're like, this is what, like, how is this fulfilling? What purpose is this? Like, then that's kind of where it hurt. And that's why I think, like we discussed, Pasadena and Utrecht becoming, realistic events in 2022 gives a lot of people of drive, gives a lot of people of determination. And I think that drive and determination does culminate at a really impactful event. And that event would be the World Championships.
Yeah, that's true.
Obviously, I'm pretty sure I can confidently say that none of us have been to Worlds.
Not yet.
However, Joe, you spoke about this was this. I hate, like, this is a terrible analogy, but like this is basically a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player's Super Bowl. Is that correct?
I would say so,
Yeah.
and it also has a very like big festival kind of feeling around it.
Mm.
Because at the time of Worlds, like, and we've seen it multiple times before in recent years, like they did the Worlds envelope events, and it's really cool because like all of us like local players get to play the Worlds format, and like we get to experience like what going to Worlds would be like, building a deck around Worlds, and I think that's what is so cool and unique about Worlds, and that's the
I
ban
did not
list.
know that. I
Yeah,
didn't know
yeah.
that people got a chance to play with the ban list. That's so cool.
Yeah. So you get to play the World's ban list. Like some shops opted not to, but like some, I think our one we chose to go ahead with the World's ban list because it
why
was
not?
just unique and cool.
Yeah, so for those of the people who are listening, so Worlds have a very different ban list to the rest of the game. I don't have to go into it too in depth, but essentially they take the lowest of what a card's legality is in either region. So obviously a really good example right now is OCG have 3 max C and we have 0. So at Worlds there is no max C.
It's
Max
at
C is
0, yeah.
banned.
A card is as legal as its lowest
Yes.
quantity in Japan and here. Japan and us have different ban lists.
Yes,
I guess,
OCG and TCG do have 2 different ban lists. And then they also take like a lot of, I had to say bullshit out, like, you know, like Life Equalizer, Magical Explosion, like a lot of like FTK enablers. Maybe not Magical Explosion, but like Life Equalizer, I know is like self-destruct button.
Yeah,
like
after 2010, they've just decided no more FTKs.
Yeah, they've got no more FTKs and no more draws is essentially kind of the way that they're wanting to push Worlds. So Worlds, the most recent one for us, that, you know, the most recent winner was the 2019. That was held in
Japan.
Germany.
Oh, Germany? I thought it was Japan.
Was Germany 2019 or was it Japan?
Joe, help, you watched.
2019, I think, was the Japanese one.
Yeah, because I think 2018. I only remember the prize card. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. No, I'll confirm it in a
anyway,
second, but carry on.
Yeah, so so the most recent Worlds was 2019, and this was won by Salamangreat. So you know, this is a deck that, you know, there are many different limitations to Worlds Worlds lists. Obviously, like we said, there's a custom ban list. Card availability is a huge factor for a lot of these events as well, because obviously Japan is essentially a couple of sets ahead of the TCG.
So if it's not out here, you can't play it at all. So Japanese players often have to kind of rewind their meta.
Yes. And they also have to, you know, not just focusing on that. Like there's TCG and OCG exclusive cards, so a lot of those are also not included. Like Dangers were a great example. Yeah. They weren't OCG legal at the time of, I think, 2019 Worlds. So that's a whole strategy taken out.
So,
oh yes,
just to confirm,
live reporting.
2019 was Germany. 2018 was Japan.
Okay, so 20, one of the two,
yeah, 20, because I remember it's that beautiful the Rock Link 5, the Black Castle.
One of the only Rock Links in the game, baby.
Yeah, one of 2, 3 now, Geonator. So I think that these are, you know, this is what your efforts culminate to. You go through all of these different event levels that we've discussed, from your locals to your regionals to nationals to YCSs to Worlds, and Worlds is truly like the pinnacle.
It's so special. Worlds is so special because it's the custom ban list and like the fact that it is a representative from, you know, each country. Usually, I mean, generally like America and Japan will have a few more than others, but it does truly feel like a coming together of Yu-Gi-Oh and just a celebration of Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, I think what's super special about it as well is like the regions get behind their players. So like what will happen is like in the OC region, the Australians and like the top level Australians, top level Kiwis, they'll get together and they'll like help each other like build a list. You'll find that like they'll test against against their mates who are going to Worlds to like give them the as you know big of an advantage as they can. And then when they go to Worlds, everyone sits at home and just like cheers them on at home, and it's so really cool. It's just a really cool event where, you know, we all want to see an OC winner. Like we all want to see like a New Zealander go and win Worlds. That would be like ideal for us, obviously.
Have, right?
So I think history-wise, the closest New Zealand got was Chris Gearing.
Came second.
Top
4,
8.
I think. Or
top
4.
Yeah, so he top 8'd. The closest Oceania was Bowden Tenyuk, who came second place with Altergeist at the 2018 World Championships. So that is the closest I believe Oceania has ever gotten to taking a Worlds.
Which on a world stage is not bad. I mean, we're very small.
We are very small,
competing with Japan and America and all those places.
And I believe also that because of our smaller region size, we do have inherently less representation at Worlds. Like you think of America, they have a very large representation. Japan, very large representation. Europe, like countries across Europe have a larger. South America, huge. But yeah, it can just be a case where Oceania, just because of its limited size, you do see less Worlds attendees. So yeah, here's hoping that going forward into potentially a 2022 Worlds, we don't know.
I'll try to take it for us, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah.
I got us.
So we are hoping that that's kind of the case going forward. We see some more Oceania representation because there is a lot of good talent in New Zealand. That's absolutely the truth. And I know there's really good talent in Australia as well.
Yeah. Just confirming that it was Bodum. Chris Guerin came 5th, I believe. So there you go.
5th. Oh, just bubbled out of top 4. I mean, impressive finish. No one's going to say that isn't impressive.
No. That was, I believe, Gladiator Beasts.
It was Grapekeeper Burn, I believe.
Yeah,
okay. Even better.
Horrible. And so for the rest of the podcast, now that we've sort of laid out the framework of how events are run, we just thought we'd bring some like introductory stories about our progression through events. We've all experienced being at the bottom and finding our way to the top of whatever heap is possible. For us, a little bit less because of lockdown, but we still, in my opinion, done quite well in the 2 years we've been playing to kind of establish ourselves as people who make an effort to go to events to win. And I think, Joe, you've had moments in your life too where you were kind of, if not considered a top running, duelist, definitely someone to look out for at events. Would you say?
Yeah, I would say in 2015, I had like sort of
That
my
was your
best
best
year where I was winning LODSs and a couple of regionals here and there. Like, and at the time, like, I don't know if I would say be a feared player or anything like that. Like, because I know that I wouldn't consider myself in the top sort of 8 or 16 in the country at the time. Like, because there were some really, really good players back then. But like, it like I went to events to win, and like at a regional level, I had a lot of success. At a national level, it's where I've like my biggest regrets in Yu-Gi-Oh have come. Like I've never topped the nationals before.
Yeah, you told us you never topped the nationals.
Yeah, and I've come close 3 out of the 4 times I've been. I think I bubbled 3 of them, and the last one I dropped after round 3 and went and played some side events. So yeah, like I've always enjoyed regional level events. Obviously, nationals is the aim and the one I want to do the best at. So hopefully when we see that come back, that's what I want to do.
What was your first event, Joe?
My first ever event, so barring like Armageddon and hobby leagues and anything like that, like an official first event was the 2006 Pharaoh Tour qualifier in Palmerston North.
Is this the one with Stratos that you could win?
I honestly, I think it was, I can't remember the proper prize for the final because I was like a little kid at the time and I knew that I just wasn't in the run-in to win that. But
the big gold sark, wasn't it?
Was the prize, I'm pretty sure. That's like $300 now.
It was huge, like, yeah. But yeah, I remember as a little kid, like it was the first time where I'll say little kid. I was like 12 at the time, and I remember it was the first event where like it felt official and cool because I was like writing out a deck list and I built a side deck that was actually like I was kind of proud of at the time. It had like your MST and like back row.
What were you playing?
And stuff. I was playing a skill drain deck. And it's like the old school one with triple goblin attack force. It had Foozler Dragon and
skill drain beats.
And I ran a chainsaw insect because I had a ultimate rare one, and I felt like a cool guy, but because I had an ultimate rare chainsaw insect.
It was good,
and it was all right.
2400 meter, right?
2-4 level 4 with a skill drain. That's just a 2500 vanilla for level 4. That's phenomenal.
It's a hot deck.
Yeah, so like it was cool. I remember going to the event and like. At the time, I had about 4 or 5 schoolmates that were all into the game, and I always remember my one mate had like he just got into the game a few weeks before, and he decided to just drop loads of money because he had like saved up and had like a part-time job at school. I know, as a 12-year-old, I had a part-time job, but
Oh my god, yeah.
yeah, he just like did jobs and got pocket money essentially, and he dropped like a bunch of money on a Monarch deck, and I remember he made top 8, and it was like this huge like cool thing because like one of our 12-year-old mates had made a top 8 of a tournament.
I mean, imagine losing to a 12-year-old. It sounds so good.
Yeah, but I mean, even I would say back then, like, and I might be wrong. There was probably more younger kids around because the game was still in its infancy itself.
Well, and it was definitely still marketed towards that younger demographic.
And you look now, if you look around, like the average age in probably Yu-Gi-Oh! In New Zealand would probably be around our age, like 20 to 30 almost, like, and it's these people that were playing the game back in 2005, 2006 that have grown up with the anime and have moved with the game.
Got money. Is probably a big one there too.
As a huge
got
one.
money.
Yeah. So that was my first competitive event. I don't think I did that badly. I remember I didn't like lose every round. I think it was probably around about 6 rounds. I went something like 2-3, 2-5, 2-4, sorry. So I remember 2-5. Yeah, no, good math. But yeah, like it was a fun event, and I remember it was my first proper taste of like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, and it hooked me in. And yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I think so. Speaking on our first event, so Lucas and I started playing the game together competitively very shortly after we started dating. And a very funny, very good story about getting back into the game. We were walking past EB, and Lucas, I believe I've spoken about it before, was watching a DZ video on the legendary hero decks. So this includes, go DZ, thank you very much. This included the Nordics, the Heroes, and the Phantom Knights. Lucas went, "Oh, I played Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid." And I went, "Me too, that's crazy." And so we got this little thing as a fun little precursor. And then at the same time, Nim Nim had just started the very famous Sealed Only. And so he'd started on Order of the Spellcasters, so Endymion Pendulum. And I went, "Oh, this seems like a great deck." And I lived in the CBD at the time, so Vagabond was my local game store. And I went, I really want to, this seems like a great idea. They had a lot of product that was still available. So structure decks, everything, Megatons, I think I got from EB Games. So Lucas and I started to build, pseudo competitive decks. Like you, we attended like our first hobby leagues. So those would have been at Vagabond and Card Merchant. And our first large scale event would have been in 2019. I believe this was the not post Worlds list. I believe this was the November ban list. This was Guardragon, Agapane, and Nightmare Mermaid were banned.
But they weren't banned.
But they weren't banned for the event.
Yeah, they weren't banned for the event. I remember that distinctly because everyone was like, "I'm so ready to not see Mermaid anymore."
Yeah,
so excited.
Mermaid Orchest was just everywhere. And so that was a really big thing that Lucas and I focused on. So Lucas and I took 2 different decks. I had been on Endymion Pendulum, and Lucas was on Heroes. Obviously, the running theme for Lucas was every opponent went, "Oh, well, you're waiting till Monday," because that was when Stratos came to 3, as did Malicious. And that was, a really good eye-opening experience. Dog walked, both of us.
Yeah,
my goodness. So rotted, so gutted. I think I won 1 game. I'm pretty sure I won a game.
No, we both went X full. Because I got a bye and you got no wins.
No, I think it was you. We both got a win, but you got a bye and a win. And
no, because you were the bottom of Swiss. Because you have the little story about.
Yes. So either way, I finished dead last.
We got owned.
Literally dead last. And Keza went as a consolation prize for last place, but sticking through for the event. I got a World Championship 2019 mat, which I think is like the
legendary Magician of Dark.
No, it's not that one. It's like it's like the Nishiwaru, or I'm sorry, that's probably really incorrect, but it's like a Dark Magician retrain, etc.
It was the JP prize card Link.
Yes, monster. The Spellcaster Link monster. So that was very humbling. And
shout out
definitely
to Keza for that, because it was such a nice gesture getting into the game, getting absolutely smacked, and then having someone go, "Oh, you stuck around. That's awesome. Here's a prize."
Yeah, and I think that's something that's not as reciprocated anymore. It takes a lot of knowledge and humbling to just stay in an event where you are just losing. I think Luke and I are at a point now where it can be very much we're just losing, we're just going to scoop and go, like just drop and go, because there's no point playing it out. You see the writing on the wall if your events things aren't going to line up. But I think at the time for Lucas and I, it was just a matter of we just have to learn. Like, this is our best learning experience, so why not make the most of it?
And how are your rounds? Like, do you remember any of your games?
Yes, Mermaid Orchest every single time.
I didn't play it once.
Yeah, Lucas somehow Neo Matrix dodged this bullet. That was Mermaid Orchest. I distinctly remember Curious Griffin setups for Anti-Spell, which was awful as a Pendulum player. I believe I went against Gren Maju. I believe I went against like zombies, and I just had nothing. So that was awesome for me. But that's 2019. That was Ruben playing Yu-Gi-Oh, Luke's and I playing Yu-Gi-Oh for maybe 2 months. So very, very learning heavy experience as opposed to there to win. The next event, which Lucas can talk about, is definitely where I think we started going forward a wee bit more with our drive for competitive success.
Yeah, this was a major event. Like you said, the gameplay, was it gameplay?
Gameplayer, yeah.
Gameplay champs.
Had these like annual, you win flights, you win, et cetera, et cetera. And Geek Culture, who Ruben now works for, hilariously, saw that was missing and decided to run their own, as a Yu-Gi-Oh distributor, like a kind of homegrown major tournament. And this was huge. There were definitely, if not 100 people, there was
80.
Yeah.
80 people.
I think this was actually the direct replacement for Gameplay Champs as well.
Exactly. And we probably would have had one last year had we not. But this was awesome. This was, go to, I think it was it was one of those race courses. Ellerslie race course.
It used to be nationals as well.
Yeah. And like just seeing, I remember the experience, like you said, writing your first deck list and all that, we'd already been through that process, but the experience of like leaving the LGS or leaving like the local game store, hobby league environment and going to a special location for an event was very magical because you have everyone driving up, you see some of your locals pull up in cars, and you're like, oh, yo, what's up? And then you see a bunch of people you've never seen before, everyone's signing up, there's a big table with all this prizing on it that you can win. And then when the rounds start, you have the announcer over the microphone. It was a huge deal for us because I think until then we had yet to see
large scale anything
that resembled like maybe the Armageddons we went to as kids. Because it's worth noting.
I didn't win Armageddon.
It's worth noting that when you played, Joe, like Yu-Gi-Oh was still very much like a hot fad. Like 2006, I remember like schools, still being in school playing Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff, and the show was still on reruns and such. So I definitely remember like back then it was more of a fad, and I was like getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh, not seeing that kind of like group excitement. But this was really awesome. I still played Heroes. Ruben still played Pendulums, but we were playing much better lists. I think at this point I had all the Vision Heroes and like a Dusted Gold and Malicious Bane had come out, which cost God knows how much money.
They were not as expensive as they are now.
They were still like $100.
Still expensive, not as expensive as they are now. I was on Endymion Pendulums, but like I had my draw engines, like Into the Voids, Upstarts. We'd managed to get Appaloosas. We had, there was so much more Sloth, LP. Like there was so much more that was accessible to us. Like I'd invested in the Mythical Beast package. There was it was truly like an upgrade.
So we both, I think I went 3-4.
Yeah, I think I was 2-5.
I think you were 4-3. I think you did better than me.
No, other way around.
Really?
I did worse.
I remember
than
you doing better.
No, I did worse than you.
And I mean, it was a horrible format for Pendulum because there was a lot of True Draco Stun. There was a lot of Thunder Dragon.
Sky Striker Orchest.
Yeah, Sky Striker Orchest. And then
pre or post the tins with Nibiru and stuff?
This was
post.
Oh, yeah, that was a rough time. Yeah. For Pendulum.
So Pendulum had a rough time. So did Hero, but I think my matchups were lucky. I got like Danger, Dark World, True Draco, and I was playing like Twins and Cosmics in the side because I barely had a side deck. I was like, I'll just play back removal. So that was funny. My main losses were to I lost to Thunder Dragon. I lost to, I believe, a Pendulum deck just absolutely trounced me. So it was a fun event. It definitely wasn't like the rise to competitive success that we wanted. But I actually did have some competitive success because there was a day 2. Was it day 2?
Yeah.
It was.
Because it was top cut and side events.
With a side event, it was single elim. I think there were like maybe 40 people signed up who didn't do well on the first day. And to my surprise, I brought Mech Knights instead of Heroes. And I won the first round, which I think we won a lost start. Because every round you won, you got like a better prize. So I won the lost start and I was like, oh, sick. There's 20 players left. Like, I'm in the top 20. That's awesome. Won one round, yay. And then I won the next round. And I was like, oh, and I won a playmat from that. and then I made it to top 4 actually in that single elimination round, and I only lost to Dinosaurs because we were both playing Go-Second decks, and he was just playing the better one.
Yeah.
But I actually won a Yu-Gi-Oh bag that I still use, and I love that bag because it's like, to me, my memory of my first quote unquote success as a Yu-Gi-Oh player. You know, single elim is stressful. You just can't drop a game. You know, it's very
like top cut every round.
Exactly.
Literally top cut every round.
So that was probably like my first taste of like real, like, you know, a little bit of pride. Everyone was like crowding around me in top 4 because everyone was bored by top cut. I think it was like just Naibo on Zephyr pendulums versus Salamangreat, and they're like, we've seen this. Like, we don't need to watch this. This is Mech Knights versus Dinosaurs. Let's go. So that was awesome. And then I guess, Joe, what was your kind of like first taste of success with your
success? I'd say the best success, first taste of success I had was a regional, probably in Palmy around about 2009. I topped a regional in Palmerston North. It was about a 35 player regional, and I got like a top 4. And I remember like just the thrill of like being in a top cut. Like as at the time, I was probably only about 13, 14, and like there would just be the crowd of people around, and like your heart would be like beating because you're like, oh man, I'm in a top cut. This is huge. I got smashed in the top cut, but that doesn't matter. Like it was fun. I made it, and like I guess that's another thing about major big events is like, you know how, and I'm sure people might be able to relate with this. After each round, you run around and you try to find your friends. Oh, how did you go? Like, how did you go last round? And you're like all following each other's records. You're like, oh, I'm X2, I'm X1, I'm undefeated. You know,
this, and then they did this, and you know, there's a lot of like that. I almost had it if I just drawn.
Yeah, the classic. If I drew this, I would have won. Yeah, but like, yeah, like it was huge for me because it was like I knew I could do it then. I was like, I can make a top cut. I just got to like pay attention, not misplay. Test for events is a major thing for me. I've always found that like if I'm lazy and I don't test for events, I obviously generally don't do very well. Like if I
so 2009, what were you playing? Sorry to interrupt. I'm very curious. 2009. I think timeline wise, that's like, is that end of Synchro?
Yeah, I think my first, I've had the date wrong, but I remember the deck that I topped with was Frog Monarch.
Nice.
Oh no, 2000. No, I would no 2009 is because Shining Darkness is 2010, so that's like
there's a few more synchro sets.
So like Ancient Prophecy, Raging Battle.
Yeah,
like that kind of
crisis. I'll be honestly, I'll be completely honest. I'm terrible with dates because like the 16 years of playing this game, like I can't remember what was 2010, what was 2005, what was this, what was that. You know, it's so hard to like pinpoint the exact like date. I remember like, you know, you'd be like 2016 was Zodiac format. You remember that sort of thing. You remember 2015 being Duelist Alliance, but like it's hard to remember like exact things. I just remember like little snippets, and because I've been to so many tournaments over the years, like you remember those like really cool like one-off games. Like I think I spoke after the podcast last week about the hand loop Mermail deck that I played in like 2015 or something, and even later I think it was like 2017. It had like Brilliant Fusion, Gen X Undying, Gen X Controller, and you used to loop like 4 or 5 cards out your opponent's hand, and it was a big meme deck. But anyway, getting a bit off topic there. Like I think the key thing with events is like you remember a lot of like these like games, and I'm sure you guys do too. Like, and the thing I always do with big events is I remember my misplays, and that's key because like I always pull that forward into my next event.
And I think that's really important to take forward. Speaking of top events, the next one that Lucas and I both went to was a Your Move series event. So this was kind of what we would describe as like a local / regional. It's kind of like the first, maybe like the last event of the year, like after Geek Culture.
I remember it being as big as the regional.
Yeah, people really showed up. This is like our kind of first evolution of deck playing. I think I'd grown sick of Pendulum because I'm just going to keep losing to board breakers because like we'd said, this is post 2019 tin. So Nibiru, Dark Ruler, you know, these are the cards that just hosed a Pendulum strategy so effectively. And so I actually switched to Altergeist. I have a very, very bittersweet story about this because I lost extravagances in the mail So I was unable to play with 3 Extravagance at this event. So my deck list was 2 Extrav, 3 Duality. And I was, which kind of, it's interesting, like we can talk about like tilting, like that was quite that was a really big thing to overcome, is you don't have your cards in time, and you are just sitting here going, I don't have my cards, my deck's not going to work. I don't have my cards, my deck's not going to work. And I think, leading up to that event, I was like, well, I just have to, sorry for the lack of a better term, play with the cards I'm dealt. And that is exactly, how it was.
Yeah, baby.
So that was really interesting, because that was, for me, a pivot from combo to control. And this was also Altergeist. I'll give context to this. This was 2019. So this is Altergeist with a multi-faker and 3 reboot still running around in the format. So back row was just as bad off as combo was, because there was just the hardest reset button to your entire strategy was just at 3 in people's side decks. There's also 3 Pank, which sucked. Pankratops at 3 is a problem. But this was really interesting for me, and I think Lucas as well, because Lucas was on Mech Knights for this event, and this is like where we see like the go second and control start to kind of grow in us as player bases, because we'd both gone from 2 combo decks, and Lucas obviously had a bit more experience with Mech Knights than I did with my Altergeist. But I found that Altergeist was really interesting, and so I managed to top 4 this event. I think there was like 30 something people, and it was, it was definitely like regional level, and so that was my first experience of like top 4ing an event. I remember my last game, of course, was against Lucas
in Swiss.
I believe my record was I want to say it was like 4-2, or was it 4-1-1?
I think you were 4-1-1 and I was 4-2. And we'd worked out that X2 wasn't going to make top 8, just with the way that Swiss had worked.
Top 4.
Oh, yeah, it was just top 4 anyway. So we like worked out like, okay, I'm not going to top. So like realistically, you should win so you can go to top cut, because otherwise I'm just dragging us both down. It's so hard when you're paired up against someone that you are like testing partners with, and it's final round and it's like, well, like, we should probably collude.
Yeah,
you don't want to, because like it ruins the. But like, why would I want to throw Ruben under the bus? So in our heads, we were like, well, let's just play it out and see what happens, and go from there.
Yeah, and I did manage to win that. This was such a hard matchup, because I remember game 1, I just got completely blown out. I went first, set back row. You just went columns, Mech Knights, kill me. And I was like, yeah, I'm dead. Game 2, I think I managed to drag out. And then game 3, this is one of my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh stories. It was very back and forth. Lucas activates World Legacy Key, which is for those who aren't aware, is a Mech Knight continuous spell. That has 2 effects, but the one that's obviously relevant for my deck is it negates the effects of trap cards in the same columns as Mech Knights. So obviously complete host to Altergeist. So Lucas activates World Legacy Key and then special summons a blue sky into a column with a set card. Was a impermanence, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. And Lucas goes, okay, blue sky effect to search. And I've got a card in my column, so this will give Lucas a search. I activate Solemn Strike set. Lucas activates a reboot from hand, and I activate a set judgment. And I think that was kind of the point where and then I had a multi-faker effect to resolve. And that is kind of what solidified my win there. But again, like 3 reboot is, I think, something that control players just don't have to deal with anymore. And it was so hard. So I top 4, lost to Green Marju, surprise, in top 4. And that's fine. Green Marju's a good deck. I even sided Imperial Iron Walls and I just never saw them.
It's funny with you say about Red Reboot in the format and control decks, how, you look at old Altergeist list and they really were on like 3 Judgment, 3 Strike of Warning, like every way to stop Red Reboot. Strike doesn't stop it, or Warning, but like just that card was so prevalent and everywhere that you had to just main the 3 Judgment and deal with it.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't need to come back either. I hate Red Reboot.
It can stay at 1.
Red Reboot, Pankratops, Called by the Grave, and Mind Control were just like the most staple 3 ofs, and that should never have been a thing because they're all like silver bullet cards. You know what I mean? They're cards like that are meant to hose one strategy, but they were just so free. Like, not a good format. And then straight after that, we kind of had what I would call like our last regional circuit. And we didn't go to that many, but there is a reason that, sadly starts to paint kind of all of our experiences at events, because we went to, I believe there was one in Botany, Bay Dragon, where I played Mech Knights. Again, I was just kind of still on Mech Knights looking for, I guess, a more meta deck. Ruben, you were on Altergeist again? Yeah. And we didn't do well at that. And then we traveled down to Hamilton Regional. So that was like our first road trip, which was sick because, a bunch of us kind of traveled down to Hamilton. And
I mean, what?
we can't keep getting in trouble with Hamilton. They play Phantom Knights now. It's different.
All right. It's changed. Okay.
Okay, but the story might not help with that reputation, because essentially what happened was we went down with Aaron Dennis, who previous Worlds contender, very, very good player. But I think had kind of, taken a few breaks and was just kind of coming back into the format. And then me and Ruben, obviously. And I think it was like round 2 or 3, Ruben on Shadow Invoked. I just look over at Aaron and Ruben, and they are just like shaking their heads like, no, we're out. I think they'd both gone like X3 or X2 after round 3. And they were just like absolutely fuming. But I was undefeated on Hero. I was playing Hero, and I was like, hell yes, like I'm doing so well. Look over at my gang. Ah, shit. So it became that situation where they'd both dropped and were just kind of like waiting for me to either win or lose. And I ended up, I think I was X1, but it had to be like X1 to top again, one of those situations. And, we give Hamilton some credit, but I did lose to Luna. It was like Luna Stun.
Wind Witch,
Burn in Time, slow play. That was what I lost to.
Oh, no.
And like the kind of slow play where like round 3, like 7 minutes on the clock, my opponent goes, give me a second, looks at his hand for about 30 seconds, looks at his extra deck for like 30, like literally just not making a play. So I call a judge, and the judge comes over and goes, all right, you got to hurry it up. And the guy's like, yeah, sure. And then the judge leaves, and then he just keeps stalling. It's like, okay, 4 minutes left. He goes, all right, like normal or Wind Witch, burn for 600, looks at extra. It's just this horrible experience. And I think this was my first time. And then he just ends on like Crystal Wing Pass. Like his whole turn could have been like 10 seconds, but obviously he knew my deck could OTK. I was playing Heroes. And this is probably the most tilted I've ever been at an event, because my hand was gas, like guaranteed OTK. But because he'd stalled for time and the judge hadn't given him like a warning the second time I called them over, I didn't have time to get to battle phase, and I lost. So it was this really, really salty experience, because I was playing like what I considered to be like my sort of pet deck, and it was my first time that I was going to top with Heroes. And I'd never experienced this before. And I think this is like maybe an unsung kind of negative part of events that does turn people away, is those experiences where, because you're new, you just don't know how to like deal with someone cheating, or someone slow playing, or someone like purposefully running the clock, things like that. Yeah. So I ended up not topping, and then COVID happened, which sounds really dark, but like it wasn't like the worst experience of my life. We still kind of had the road trip home. We were salty as hell, just like all talking mad shit. So like it wasn't like a negative experience, but it was a little bit tilting, I should say.
I think I've had those sorts of experiences before too. Like I know one for me, and this event definitely never happened. The 3v3, like for me, like I was having such a good tournament up until the final, and I just made some major, like really, really amateur misplays, and like the whole way home, I was just like, oh man. Like it sucked. Like,
you just know you could have done better, yeah.
Oh, I knew 100% what I had to do. I was back so it was my first event back from like a 4-year break. Oh no, sorry. Yeah. No, that's wrong. I came back for like that 1 year in 2019. So yeah, a year and a bit break. And I did a little bit of testing. I'd like done a bit of net decking and stuff, like looking online, like seeing what other people were playing in the LGS, PPG, and all that sort of thing for Shadow Invoked. And what I did is something like I tried to go into that tournament with like a point of difference to my deck. And
Mhm.
this is something that I've done in the past and had either really good success with it or the opposite, where I just like go X whatever and just drop. And what I did is I decided to play Shadow Invoked without Dogmatica. I didn't play Nadir Servant, and the reason was because I was like, oh well, I'll wait for the player, because the opposing player always kind of waits for the Nadir Servant to try to stop that for the Search of Schism. So I just played heavier hand traps. So I played main decked Phantasme, because at the time it was a bunch of Dragon Link and Prank Kids, and it paid off like all day. I would just make Phantasme Winder, and I'll just win a game. And yeah, it's a bit sacky, but like all I would do is just make Phantasme Winder, and then just follow up with whatever else and just attack for game. But I main deck Pancratops and Eldritch the Golden Lord as well, and and it was just so cool because like it was my first tournament back. I was feeling confident, and all throughout Swiss, I don't know if I dropped a match the whole day up until the final. Oh no, I lost against. I think I played Marshall in round 4 or something, and I lost to him in Swiss 2-1, and then I beat him 2-0 in the top 4. Because I had Winder, Droll, and Lockbird. He'll tell you about that. So yeah, but I didn't really make many misplays at all day, and I was super happy with how I went. Got to the final. There was a bit of a delay to get into the final. We're all a bit.
There was a delay. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, there's a bit of a delay, and like we were sitting around waiting for the final to come, and like I was tired. Like we'd been there since because I traveled like the night before. And I was just tired, and I went up against Dino, and the major misplay that plays in my head all the time is, and you spoke about it in the podcast where you talked about winning the tournament. I decided not to flip up the can only be one when he activated Double Evolution Pill. I decided not to activate Schism when he normal summoned a Dino and made a token. Like it was just major misplays that were like super easy to like avoid, and I don't know if I would have won the game, but like I don't know, I'll win the under Dino like when he's just summoned one
do you
thing.
think that's because you just haven't practiced much against dinos? Like,
well, I would like to say yes, but like probably no. Like because I played Dino for like over the years, and I know what they do, and I know how they function, and I know how Shadow function, and I know I knew exactly after what I did, and I think like someone was behind me, like no, like why didn't you activate it when he activated the Double Evolution Pill? And I was like, oh yeah. Damn, that sucks.
Yeah, and the Schism on like I think I played. We can talk about it later, but there's a tournament where I played Shadow Invoked, and I think I played 3 Dino players, and it's like once I knew how that matchup worked, like you say, like there are some very important things.
It's classic. It's just like normal summon Ovi, Lost World Effect, summon Winder. That's your special
actually
summon.
Lose the game. It's crazy.
Yeah,
You've got nothing else.
That for me, I think that what upset me was because I made like no misplays all day, essentially, like for my first tournament back, and I felt so confident going into the final because we just come off that win.
Dino is one of the best players I know.
And
has been playing dinosaurs for years. There's a very big likelihood that like he
would still
playing
get around
into Schism, knowing that you were going to do it, and like probably had to play through it. I mean, maybe not. Sometimes you just go for it.
Maybe not. Like sometimes he wouldn't have the out, but like if you don't have the out, you don't have the out. But like I guess I'll never know that now. But like it's something that
that's why the misplays loop in your head. You just don't know what would have happened if you hadn't messed that up.
But for me, it's something I will hopefully learn from, and like I don't want to like go through that process again where I like have a perfect day and then choke at the final. Like and I now know, I guess I learned the interactions a bit more. Like I knew them at the time, but like it reinforced that interaction where like, hey, Schism on the normal summon's pretty good. Or don't wait for the ultimate conductor to come out before you activate lose one turn. Like not lose one turn, there can only be one. So yeah, like you definitely learn from these events, and I think that's the key to that whole ramble there. Is like that you need to like look at your misplays, reevaluate them, and be like, I don't want to do that next big event. But yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, we've all got some really good insight to like how events run, our personal experience with events. And I think I would like to just, I can see we're over an hour of recording now, so we're really, got some great, I hope people have taken some really good tips. And if people want to hear more about our 3v3 experience, that is available to listen to. I think what I'd like to wrap or like kind of finalize this podcast on is what's coming up and how do you prepare for it? I guess I'm, in the event scene in terms of organizing. So we have North Island Championships. That's at the end of November, and that's via Remote Duel. We obviously have OTS Store Championships. Those are the 20th and 21st of November. So those are select stores will be running those. And obviously we have the announcement from Konami that there is another Remote Duel YCS occurring the start of, or like 11th and 12th of December. So what do you guys think are some really good like strategies to prepare for events? I think we've talked about some really good, event history. What do you think, Lucas, is a good way to prepare for an event?
Definitely testing. I'm a big labber. Like I like to, have multiple decks in the option category before I go into events. The ones that I started doing better at were when people like Dino, I started to ask them like, hey, do you want to test? Like we both have good decks. I think North Island Champs, I was on Infernoble, he was on Virtual World. I bubbled that, but I did well. And then the Shuffle and Cut Envelope tournament, we both took the same list, which is something I hadn't done before, and that was really rad because we got to just like, perfect, like you say with the Worlds players, test something. Did it work? Did it not? Go away, try it against different decks, come back with new knowledge. And I top 8'd that. So I think the labbing and testing for me is a huge part of it. And obviously that includes like reading into the meta, what other people are playing. When you build your side deck, what are your biggest weaknesses? Ruben, what do you do before an event that you think is like your best advice?
I'm a big statistics fan. As much as I do enjoy testing, I have a very analytic viewpoint. I look at what people are succeeding with, because I think there are some really unique deck builders here in New Zealand, but I think a lot of people do rely on net decking, and I mean that's no shade, that's no disrespect to anyone. I'm a filthy net decker, just as a lot of people are.
Yeah, Ruben's a net decker
mostly is.
Yeah, and I think we take decks that are succeeding as a base to build off of. But I personally look for really succinct competitive decks online, and that's because I know that is what I will most likely see going forward.
Well, there's nothing wrong with getting a baseline from a net deck.
Oh, at all. And I think that, that's, people who take a deck list card for card, that's probably what I'm most likely going to be seeing, or what I prepare the most for, is just people going, I don't really have enough to prepare for. Like, I can't really deck build in this amount of time. I'll just take the main deck and tweak the side a little bit.
You very much go for like, I'm going to counter what most people are going to net deck.
Yeah.
And I'll take more of the approach of like, I want to do something no one's expecting. I think like you said, Joe, like do something no one's expecting so that the net decked decks suck against my deck.
Yeah.
And how that worked with like Shadol is I didn't play any hand traps in a format full of like people playing a ton of hand traps, and instead just played Tactics Droplet Super Poly. Before that was like everywhere in Shadol lists. A lot of Shadol lists were still on like Alistair 10 hand traps.
Yeah.
And oh my God, all day just like smashing people with Super Poly and Tactics felt so good.
Tactics take Dragoon.
Yeah.
That's exactly the vibe.
And again, like we read a lot of Dragoon in the format. That's why we made that decision.
And it was true. And Joe, you've touched on testing. That was a big thing for you preparing for events. What's like another good tip that you would give to people wanting to prepare for larger scale events?
So one huge thing for me, and the formats where I've done the best in, is just knowledge of other decks. Like, so what I like to do now, and like I'm getting a bit better at it. Like, this is probably the first time I've started to like play other decks more since coming back. Is I like to look at what the meta is, and just even if you just boot up on your phone or on your computer, just open up Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro, and just play through some like test hands of other decks, so you at least understand the interactions of the other deck. Then you can like kind of build on the choke points. You know where those choke points are, and I know that comes in testing, but it's really important to see it from the perspective of the other player. So, like, if you don't know how, I guess, like Flunderies work, or Floowanderies, I should say right now, you go and play the deck. Just go build up, open up Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro, see where the choke points are, see what you want to hit, see how they kind of build their turn as such. And once you understand that interaction and you know it from the standpoint of the player, you can better counter it. Like, and that's why in 2015 I did so well, is because I played all of the decks. So I knew how to stop BA. I knew how to stop, Cosmo at the time, or these sorts of decks. And because I played them all, I knew the choke points, and that's how I did well in those sort of in that era.
It's almost like when you want to learn a deck, you should lose with it, not win with it. Yeah. Because when you lose with a deck, you learn how to beat that deck, if that makes sense. Like, oh, I lost to when they did this. Oh, I can do that to them. And they'll, you know what I mean? You get the win off of that. That's totally good advice.
Yeah. Agreed. Absolutely, 100%.
I think my last major advice for events, which is it sounds really obvious, but it's definitely to prepare for a long and arduous process. I can't tell you how many times I've dropped matches to being hungry or tired and thirsty and needing to use the bathroom. All those things are super important. And I also think when I started going to events, no longer kind of a new player, but someone who had experience and tops, I started going to events with the mindset of I'm not dropping a match. Not just oh, I hope I come top 30. I hope I'm in the top half, haha. But definitely in that mindset of any misplay is inexcusable, and I just need to be 100%. And this might seem a little intense for some people getting into the game, but when you get into that kind of upper echelon, you have to start really expecting a lot from yourself. And I think that matters a lot. Once you start expecting the best from yourself internally, you sit down against that opponent that you were afraid of, oh my God, they're my worst matchup, yada, yada. And you're nope, I'm not going to let it get to me. I have the outs. I know how I've prepared for this, and I'm going to beat them. That mattered so much. And even how you, a lot of people love to be very kind of friendly and paternal when playing matches. But from my experience, that's always been has been during the match, at least, a detriment. After the match, don't be a dick. But during the match, I think it's totally fine to be normal summon, activate effect, response, yada yada. Imposing that kind of professionalism also just trains yourself to take things seriously, to not kind of give away information needlessly. So many times at events, I've had opponents go, they open their hand and then go what the fuck, they make a kind of friendly remark about haha, past turn, I guess I bricked. And that just gives me way more information. Oh, if they've bricked and they're not passing to bluff, I know that they don't have any starters, so I don't have to worry so much about putting up multiple negates. I can just
I'm worrying about hand traps now because that means that they don't have playables. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is just keep it, less is more. In the world of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, the less you give away, the more you're likely to succeed. Because
and it's tough for people because we're so social,
so interactive. But it's funny because against Dino, so competitive, reads you like a book the second you do something like that. He'll go, "You've got that in your hand," and you go, "How the do you know that one?" And he's like, "I just, you can read it." And that's a really, really good skill to kind of adopt. Is just nooch poker face.
One last major point I'll put in, and this goes to any level of Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's huge. Is just declare your phases and wait for response times. Don't rush anything through. Don't give away cards you don't need to give away. It's one thing at Hobby League I see quite a bit, and I've been trying to help the guys with it. They'll activate a card and they'll just they'll just do the effect, or they'll flip up a solemn strike and they'll be like, "Oh wait, can I strike that?" Just take your time, work it out. Declare phases is a huge one in Yu-Gi-Oh that a lot of people don't do. Always just draw standby, and then at least your opponent then knows, okay, he's in the standby phase. And then if you go main phase, and then it kind of gives them an opportunity to be like, well, in your standby phase, I want to do this, rather than just go and draw, summon this. Oh, wait, in your standby phase, I wanted to do this, and now you know that they have that card that normal summoned or whatever. So that's a major thing just at any level of Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's something that I try to reinforce a little bit. It's just declare your phases and wait for response times.
Yep.
That's funny. I actually ran into... Sorry.
No, patience. Let's just be patient, be observant.
Yeah. Patience and observance. I actually ran into this yesterday. There was an extravaganza event. And the only match that I lost, one of the relevant things, I guess this is more in the realm of declaring cost and poker face and all that, was I had Virtual World Fan and Gossip Shadow on the field. and my opponent just made an access code and went, I'll pop both your guys, right?
Yeah.
And me being like the rules advocate that I am, I'm like, oh, like declare, each one separately. And then he went, oh, does one of them have an effect? And I was like, oh, god damn it.
Yeah.
I should have just let it happen. Like, why did I mean, I ended up winning that game, I think. Or I lost that game, but
Won the match.
I lost the match to other things. But yeah, I was still just kind of like, oh, I should have just shut my damn mouth. And I still do it. Like, it's
I think
it's a little
as well
harder over a remote duel because people are it's a bit more lax, like I don't know, with connections and lag and stuff. Like, it's harder to be strict about like, excuse me, which phase are we in?
It's important though, because there's windows of like activation that you need to like give your opponent, and then like if everyone does it, then like it's a much easier game to play, like because you can and I've always like from the start I've always gone draw, stand by main. It's just like ingrained in me. Like I don't ever not declare my phases, and some people are like, oh, why are you talking about your phases all the time? It's like, well, it's because it's a massive part of the game. Like, you need to declare them. Draw phase, hand destruction, discard Treeborn Frog,
Stand by phase, Treeborn Frog. So I think that's really important. Well, I think that's been a really good conversation about events past, present, and future. I think we'd like to wrap up this podcast with a incredible
one email,
which we asked for.
We got one email, guys.
So thank you very much to Marshall. Shout out to Marshall for letting us know of something that we might have omitted in our last podcast.
Do you want to read this email? I'm going to post it into the
post it into the chat for me.
Yeah, we'll let Joe have the honor of reading this incredible email from Marshall. So take it away, Joe.
Dear the Downs that I face, I'm emailing you today in regards to your latest podcast titled 34A, A Brief History of Meta Structure Decks. I'm disappointed to inform you that after listening to your podcast for exactly 1 hour, 3 minutes and 45 seconds, there's yet to be a mention of the big word, powerful ABC structure deck. Yep.
Now the indubitably powerful
ABC structure deck.
Thank you.
Now that I cannot finish the podcast, now I cannot finish this podcast tonight as I'm very preoccupied. However, I must insist, if this cast does not does not indeed make no mention of Alphabet Breaker himself, you will have lost an avid fanatic. Yours sincerely, Marshall.
So we'd like to start off by formally apologizing to Marshall for the omission of ABC, because it is listed in TCG Player, Alphabet Breaker, as it is listed in TCG Player as Structure Deck Kyber. So for quota, it absolutely was a structure deck. Yeah. Joe, what's your personal experience with ABC throughout history?
So, for the YouTube video, insert picture of me at regional. LLDS. So, when this deck was released, I remember the weekend. My friend goes to me, "Hey, can we go to this event? ABC just came out," and I'm like, "Don't really want to." He was like, "I'll give you a free drive down to Wellington. Just come." And I'm like, "Okay then." I play ABC for the first time, first weekend of the event, first structure deck release. And I went on to win the tournament.
And how was your record just for this tournament? I'm just curious to know. How was your record?
Drop a single game.
Nice.
And
wow.
I remember it because it was the only tournament I've ever done that, where like I just literally just wiped the whole tournament. I remember round 1 against Alexander Baxter. He's the one who drove me down, so shout outs to him. I set up an ABC Dragon Buster with 2 Solemn Strikes and a Warning face down, and he's playing
just
ABC.
draws Solemn Strike. What can I say?
So I won that, and then I went on to win the tournament, and there will be a picture posted up with me holding the ABC Dragon Buster in my hand.
Zoom in on that picture. Get some CSI enhanced.
I was very aware that structure deck came out, but for some reason, completely forgot about it last week.
Let me say on the record, Marshall, I'm not apologizing. You know why? I am dedicated to erasing ABC from the history of meta. Every single time it's potentially come up, we've just ignored it. And at this point, I'm just committing to the bit. ABC never topped. I don't know what you're talking about. Acquisitiveness, never been meta. Terrible card.
This was a starter deck, so we were never a structure deck.
It wasn't even a structure deck. It was a starter deck.
No,
Right.
it was a structure deck.
Oh, okay.
It absolutely was. It was structure deck Kaiba.
Yeah.
Well, it was called structure. It's like a starter deck. Come on,
That's
no
probably-
anime characters
yeah.
in meta? No, that's
I think
never
that's
happened.
why it probably skipped our minds, is because I was going off like an official list and it had all the pictures of the structure decks, and then I saw a Kaiba one and I was like, yeah, that's a starter deck.
Every Kaiba deck is just like some bad blue eyes cards. Like, how could we possibly have known?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
not the fact that I opened three of them and went to a tournament. Yeah, but that's all right. That's fine.
Congratulations on that success. So if you believe, just like Marshall, that we have omitted an event, or if you are listening to previous event or previous podcasts and thinking, you guys missed out on something really important, please email us at thefacedowns@gmail.com. We are standing by, ready to read any of your questions, queries, and concerns on episodes.
We'll read like anything you send. And if you want to send like a nice question, like something, I don't know, like what's your favorite fusion monster that isn't just roasting us for getting things wrong, you can also send that to thefacetowns@gmail.com.
Even just like, what are your thoughts on this tech card, or what are your thoughts on this? Like, we won't roast you for it. We're just like,
we'll give you side deck advice.
Yeah.
We'll do whatever.
And I think, we are, like I said last podcast, we are aiming to do a question and answer. So again, if you have any insightful questions, you think, ones that you're wanting to know, but also please feel free to contact us. We are looking forward to doing such a podcast further down the line. But yes,
What's that email
so
address
that's thefacedowns@gmail.com. That's thefacedowns@gmail.com.
Or you can just message us on Twitter at Lucas_TFD or RubenTFD.
Mine's yet to be there, but it will be.
All right. Joe.
Come on, Joe.
And also, if you're listening,
TFD.
I could. If you're listening and you are on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Instead Facebook page, we will also accept the questions in the comment section there, as long as they're relevant.
True.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool.
And thank you very much for joining us for a discussion on events past, present, and future, with some success of Joe's that was omitted during the last episode. And we look forward to having another episode out for you soon.
Wait.
Outro.
Outro.
Signing off. Yeah.
It's coming.
Your name.
I'm Lucas.
I'm Ruben.
And I'm Joe.
And you've been listening to The Face Downs. Damn, it just gets better
Seamless
every
outro.
Strong outro game.
It just
Incredible.
gets better.